What is up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Round. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach Kevin Smith, and we're talking about some old faces and new places today. Coach, what's going on?
What's up, Jeff? February, kind of a little bit of a dead time right now in the NFL calendar, but there aren't many weeks like this.
There's only 2 months in the calendar year that are like this. It's the month of July bleeding into August, before training camps start, and that's after spring workouts have concluded. And then it's this month before the new league year starts. So I like the direction we went with this show. We're just really talking about what we think could happen with some big marquee players maybe not all of them marquee players, but also with some organizations, what could be happening here. So let's start this show off with, this is an interesting situation. We're talking about Myles Garrett and the Cleveland Browns. So Myles Garrett, right after the season ended, this was before the Super Bowl, he came out and said publicly he's requesting a trade. I want out. He doesn't feel like the Browns are going in the same direction. The Browns have openly said, we're not trading Myles Garrett. Whether you think that's right or wrong, that's what they're saying. He doubled down on Radio Row, going out there and saying, I want out. Like, he's on radio spots saying, like, I don't want to be here anymore. Will Myles Garrett play in Cleveland next season? What do you think, Coach?
Honestly, I don't think he will, because I think Cleveland recognizes that they're pretty far away from being a contender.
Right.
And that the assets they could acquire by moving him, either in the form of a player or draft picks, would probably ultimately be more valuable than a disgruntled Myles Garrett, who could potentially create turmoil in that locker room and erode the culture. Although in Cleveland, the culture is not exactly stellar to begin with. But it just feels like the potential to move him right now is there, and you strike while the iron is hot. So I don't know. Maybe the best way to answer this question, Jeff, is to look at it from the opposite end. What would it take to bring him back to Cleveland? That's where I really struggle to find the answer.
I don't see any reason, if the Browns were smart. Now, they said what they had to. You got to appease the fan base, right? We're trying to keep Myles Garrett. He's the marquee name on the roster. If they're smart, and they aren't, I mean, history has shown us that the Browns are not an intelligent organization in multiple ways. They would trade him. You would trade him now, and you would get maximum return. And that way you could really rebuild. But how do they keep him? I don't think there's a way that they can do that without getting like a marquee quarterback in Cleveland that makes him think we can actually win a Super Bowl. And it's not Deshaun Watson. Whether he's even back next year, who knows? It's not Jameis Winston. If they pick up Kirk Cousins, is that going to move the needle for Myles Garrett? No. The answer is no. Like, whether people like it or not, it's not. I don't think he should play in Cleveland next season, but I'm predicting that he will, because I don't think the Browns have the cojones, or as they said in Major League 2, the marbles, to actually trade the guy, even though it could be very beneficial to the organization. What do you think?
Well, you got to find a trade partner. And now you think about, all right, well, what teams could potentially be in play for a Myles Garrett? And you think, well, there's kind of like two groups of teams there. There's the teams that feel like they're one piece away, the Buffalo Bills, a team like that. Hey, man, we can't get past Patrick Mahomes. What could really help us get past Patrick Mahomes? Well, you just watch the Eagles assault him with their front four. What if we add Myles Garrett? So you got a group of teams like that. Now, what would the Bills be able to give back? That obviously becomes the key question. If you're Buffalo, is it worth parting with some future number one picks? I don't know what the market would demand for Myles Garrett. But if you're trading picks, it's certainly a number one, or maybe even more than that are in the conversation. But if you're Buffalo and you're like, we're a Myles Garrett away from winning the Super Bowl, which they might be, do you say we're going to unload some of that capital? The other group of teams are like the desperate teams that are willing to make a move just because that's been their MO, like the Cowboys, right? The Cowboys are a desperate team that will do anything to be relevant. Jerry Jones is 82 years old. He wants to win another Super Bowl. He's starstruck. He loves, star quality players. So with Dallas would be a team that would probably be willing to overtrade They probably give you more than really they would need to get Myles Garrett. So if you're Cleveland, man, those are like the two angles I think that you need to work. Find the trade partner that's the most desperate and see if you can get the maximum return.
Let me give you a team that's pulled off big trades before, and they were fair trades in my opinion, but they've done it. They've made those big moves, and I think they could benefit from having a Myles Garrett on their roster, and they could be one player away, and that is the Detroit Lions. I think Detroit, I mean, think about the Jared Goff trade and Matthew Stafford. Like, that was a big deal. Like, that was a big, momentous trade. And yes, Matthew Stafford obviously won a Super Bowl in LA, and Jared Goff has been extremely successful. If you pair Myles Garrett with Aiden Hutchinson, assuming he's able to come back and be healthy, their defense struggled after they went through all of those injuries. And it wasn't just Aiden Hutchinson. I could see Denver, and we know that that organization is aggressive in the way they play the game and the way they handle the offseason. I wouldn't be shocked if they put a call in and say, what's it going to take to get Myles Garrett up here in our Honolulu blue? I think that would be a good marriage, wouldn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. That's a team to look at, right? Why not if you're Detroit?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're Detroit and Buffalo, you've never won a Super Bowl. Your fan base is desperate for something like that. What if you have to overpay a little bit and maybe mortgage a little bit of the future? Who cares? It's been an endless streak of futility. So what's a few more years of futility if you don't get it done? Take the swing.
The Detroit Lions really, and Buffalo, you bring up a good point in the AFC. I wonder if the Browns would say, I'd rather do business with an NFC team, not that they're going to contend for anything, but that's going to be an interesting storyline to watch. Myles Garrett, does he get traded again? I predict he stays in Cleveland. You predict he gets moved?
I think he's going to get moved.
Okay. Do you think it happens before free agency, during free agency? Is there a timeline in your head?
I think the comp from a compensation standpoint is going to have to involve draft picks. So somewhere in that, certainly before the draft, but probably somewhere in that gray area in March. Yeah.
All right, so this is the ongoing theme of today's show is old faces, new places with a question mark there because we don't know where they're going to go or if they're going to go at all, like we just mentioned Myles Garrett. Let's talk about Old Faithful, if you want to call him that, Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is out with the Jets, and supposedly Aaron Glenn told him, like, look, if you're going to be our quarterback, you're done with Pat McAfee. We're not going to have this every single Tuesday media barrage of what you're saying on the show. I don't blame him. We talked about the Jets and what they should do with Aaron Rodgers, and they're done. They're done with him. Aaron Rodgers reportedly still wants to play. That's the question. Will he be in the NFL next season, Coach? What do you think?
Aaron Rodgers, starting quarterback, Pittsburgh Steelers.
Stop it. Stop it. Don't you dare say that.
All right. No, I don't see that either. Here's what I struggle with, Jeff, to answer that question. First of all, if Aaron Rodgers is going to continue to play, he's going to want to do so as a starter, right? I mean, there's no way Aaron Rodgers is holding a clipboard somewhere.
No.
Where's he go? Like, that's where I struggle to find the landing spot for Aaron Rodgers.
That's a tough question because when you look at the landscape of quarterbacks, you would think that it would be a team that's saying we're a quarterback away. But I don't think if you're a quarterback away that Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback that's going to get you over that proverbial hump. He didn't show that. I mean, think about his last 2 years. 2 years ago in 2023, played like 5 snaps and ruptured his Achilles tendon, done for the year. This past season, he had limited mobility and his accuracy wasn't what it normally is. He turned the ball over at a ridiculous clip, and he does bring baggage. It's just who he is. That's the nature of the beast. He brings baggage. I really struggle to find a team that they're like, yeah, this fits. There is one team that comes to mind. They have no quarterback, and it's not the Steelers. Please spare me. To me, it's the Raiders. Could you imagine the Raiders if they choose like, hey, we're not going to go the draft pick route. We want to try and build up the team, build up the roster. We're just looking for a quarterback for a year. Let's get Aaron Rodgers to come out to Vegas and we'll let him play it for a season. I could see that maybe, but that would be if they don't have any other options. And that might be what it comes down to. He might not get signed by anyone if and when he's released until post NFL draft, when teams are like, okay, we didn't get a free agent quarterback before the draft. We didn't get one in the draft. I don't know. Vegas comes to mind.
I thought about Vegas, but then they just signed Chip Kelly to be their OC.
That's
And the
true.
marriage of Chip Kelly and Aaron Rodgers would be a freaking nightmare. Right?
No, that would
Chip
be
Kelly,
great. That would be great.
well, from an entertainment standpoint, it'd be great. Chip Kelly is notoriously tough on quarterbacks and not necessarily the easiest guy to work with. At least that's his reputation. Now, Pete Carroll, I could see being a guy who being so experienced, having been around star players and big personalities before, he's a guy who I could see saying, I can make it work with Aaron Rodgers. But Chip Kelly and Aaron Rodgers, that'd be a tough marriage, man.
Let me throw out another team. Is it an NFC team? And we're assuming they're going to lose their starter from 2024 to free agency. They do have a rookie who missed all this year. You know where I'm going, the Minnesota Vikings. With that coaching staff, which is the anti-Chip Kelly. You know, Kevin O'Connell is like he's a quarterback whisperer. He's going to get the best out of his players. What do you think about that?
I think down in Austin, Texas, that David Stefano just got chest pains.
That's for you, Dave. That's for you.
Aaron Rodgers completely following the Brett Favre plan, right?
Yes.
Green Bay to New York to Minnesota. It's not out of the question. Minnesota is right there. And I think, they're a team that's going to probably get hit pretty hard in free agency. So that'll be a concern for them. I don't know what their feelings are about J.J. McCarthy. I don't know how close they think he is to being a starter. Is he a day one starter? Dave, who's kind of our Vikings Connect here at FFSN, raved about him, not necessarily from a personal basis, but in terms of what he was hearing from Minnesota and how they saw McCarthy. So maybe they believe he can start for them right away. But if they don't, they would think, I guess, about an Aaron Rodgers, sure. But I just it comes back to what you said a minute ago about if you think you're a quarterback away, is he the guy? And I just don't know how many teams are sold that he can be the guy anymore. He's going to be 41.
Yeah. What are the odds that he just says I'm done and he doesn't play?
If he doesn't find the right situation, I don't think that that's out of the question. He's got some media career waiting for him. He's a big personality. People are going to throw money at him to do this or to do that. It just depends about that competitive fire.
Yeah. All right, so enough Aaron Rodgers talk. Let's talk about Matthew Stafford, who is under contract with the LA Rams, but the LA Rams are undergoing a little bit of a transition. Cooper Kupp, they've told them that he can seek a trade. They're going to try and trade him. I think most NFL teams, the way that they view this is, well, Cooper Kupp, aging player, we're going to wait and see if he gets released, and then we'll talk about bringing him on. We're not really looking to trade for that contract. Matthew Stafford's a little bit different. He still is playing at a high level. He's going to be 37, I believe, this year. And so he still has a couple years left. I think that Matthew Stafford, if you're a team that feels like, again, quarterback away, let's make a deal. This would be a trade. I bring up the Vikings, and David Stefano might have had a heart attack if he didn't have a heart attack. Maybe the Vikings were to trade for a Matthew Stafford. I think that would be a phenomenal marriage up in Minnesota with the weapons that he has at his disposal. But which team will Matthew Stafford quarterback next season, Coach? What do you think?
So I think the Vikings are very intriguing.
Yeah.
You have the history between Matthew Stafford and Kevin O'Connell. O'Connell was the OC in LA when they won the Super Bowl a couple years ago when Stafford was there. That was the job, or that was the season that catapulted him to the head coaching job in Minnesota. So Stafford and O'Connell have a relationship. I could even envision a scenario where you see the Rams again quarterback swapping, right? You had the Goff for Stafford trade a few years ago. I could see a scenario where they trade Stafford to the Vikings and then Darnold goes and signs with LA to become their quarterback because he's running that McVay system up there in Minnesota. And if the Rams, or if Stafford was adamant about wanting out, Darnold would be a pretty good replacement for him as a bridge quarterback in LA. The other team I would think about is the Giants. And that might not be ideal for Matthew Stafford from a talent perspective, but he would have Malik Neighbors, who's an attractive target. The Giants do have the third pick in the draft, or the second pick. I mean, they're right at the top. They could get a guy like a Travis Henry to add to the receiving core. And Brian Dable, man, he's got to win now. Like he was on the block a little bit, right? He was on the chopping block, and when he was brought back, I think it's with the understanding like they need to improve and improve significantly, or he's probably going to be out. And they don't have a quarterback, so taking a big swing on a guy like Stafford. And lastly, Kelly Stafford, his wife, is a media personality who's got a big podcast with a big following. I can't imagine she'd be disappointed landing in the New York media market.
Yeah.
And that stuff might not be the ultimate decider, but it weighs. It's a part of the equation.
One part of the equation that I don't know, and I don't know if you know, I don't know if he has a no trade clause in his contract.
I don't know.
If he has a no trade clause, so in other words, people don't know this, he gets to okay whether he gets traded or not. I can't see him wanting to go to New York. Like, why would I spend the last few years of my career with the Giants, which, yeah, it might be attractive for a lot of reasons, but really they're not close to winning. I'd rather go to Minnesota. Minnesota, a team that had the second best regular season record and was really close, and they have some skill players there. And I get along with the coach. I feel like that would be a better setting for him. There's a lot of people that would be talking about the Steelers. I don't think that's a viable option. I just think Matthew Stafford, the deal's got to be right, because if worst case scenario, I think he just returns to LA. I think that if I were to put odds money down, I'm betting that he is back with the Rams next year. What about you?
I am too, simply because the trade scenarios are very complicated.
Yeah.
And the only one that makes a lot of sense to me is Minnesota. So if it doesn't happen there, then I struggle to see it happening anywhere else.
Which means that by the time this airs on Tuesday morning, he'll get traded. So, all right, let's go to our next one. This is, hey, who's going to quarterback two teams in the AFC North, the Steelers and the Browns? Obviously, the Browns dealing with the Deshaun Watson mess still, that contract where he ruptured his Achilles tendon. He re-ruptured his Achilles tendon. That was a weird scenario that we never talked about on the podcast, that it almost seemed like a surprise. Like he woke up one day and had discomfort, and it turns out he ruptured it again. I'm not going to go there. But anyways, the Steelers obviously have no quarterback under contract outside of Skylar Thompson on a reserve deal. This is a very interesting situation for both of these teams. Let's start with Cleveland, coach. Who's going to quarterback the Browns in 2025?
I think Deshaun Watson's going to quarterback the Browns, because they're still he restructured his contract, but they're still committed to over $70 million.
Yep.
They're on the hook to him for $70 million. Mm-hmm. They can't find a trade partner. Nobody's trading for him. I don't know what his status is with all of these lawsuits against him. I don't know if he settled all of them or if there's some up in the air, but that makes him fairly toxic to take on. The contract makes him almost impossible to take on. And if you're Cleveland, are you still going to pay him $70-something million to be your backup? All right, so let's say you are. Who's going to replace him? Like that's the other issue, man. Unless the Browns going to swing a trade for Stafford, I can't imagine that's going to happen. You got to have a clear upgrade on him to be able to justify paying somebody or paying him all that money and playing somebody else. Is Sam Darnold a clear upgrade on Deshaun Watson? I mean, he played better this year, but historically the answer is no. I just can't see a scenario where he's not the quarterback, not because they necessarily want him, but because they can't find somebody else.
Well, the first question that needs answered for me is he healthy? Is he actually going to be healthy? When you rupture your Achilles tendon, it typically is a 9-month to a year recovery before you start to feel like you are back to normal again. They've made great advancements in the surgery and the repairing of that tendon, but the dude ruptured it again, so he had to have a second surgery. That sets him back. If I'm the Browns, and again, we talked about with Myles Garrett at the top of the show, I would just cut ties with him. You're owing him the money anyways, and you're going to just eat it. Do what the Broncos did with Russell Wilson. We know that we have $40+ million that we're going to owe this guy, but you know what? We're going to pay him to go away because it's nothing but a cloud over the organization. I would cut ties with Deshaun Watson. Tell him that, hey, good luck. Move on with your life's work, whatever that is. I don't see a team signing him. So, hey, he collects his money and he's off doing whatever he does. As for the only downside to that, though, is that they can't continue to restructure his deal to ease the salary cap hit in future years and continue to kick the can down the road. They would have to eventually just eat that sum. And then I don't know if they're willing to do that. But I think they go after someone like Kirk Cousins. I think that, Kirk Cousins' time in Atlanta is up with Michael Penix Jr. being the starter moving forward. He's a guy we haven't talked about. Or do they try and go after a Derek Carr, someone else who's potentially going to be on the move? Those are two names that come to mind when I think of Cleveland. Are they upgrades? Well, Deshaun Watson was pretty terrible, so it could be an upgrade. But I would say that right now, the leader in the clubhouse for me, for the Browns, is Kirk Cousins.
I think if Myles Garrett gets traded, it greatly increases the likelihood that Deshaun Watson gets cut.
Yeah.
Because then what you're saying is we're rebuilding.
Right.
And we're gonna take the cap hit and start over, and maybe we're gonna wind up winning 3 games, but we're gonna get a high draft pick, etc. So I think it'll be very interesting to see if those two things go hand in hand.
And, do they draft a quarterback and maybe they ride with a rookie?
Yeah.
That is a possibility. I could see them drafting. What do they have? The 3rd pick overall? Or do they have third? If Cam Ward is there, do they draft Cam Ward? And maybe they bring back a Jameis Winston on a really cheap deal to help him mentor the young guy. Not that I would want him mentoring a quarterback, but still, you understand what I'm saying. That's a possibility as well. So this is tough, but let's go to Pittsburgh. Let's talk about the Steelers. We're both Steeler fans. I think we both have an idea as to what we would want the Steelers to do, and that is signing Justin Fields. I think, though, that there's some suitors for him out there that could drive up the price. Teams like the Jets might view him as a viable option. There's a bunch of teams, I think, that are looking for a quarterback that they might say, hey, Justin Fields actually was 4-2 for the Steelers, didn't turn the ball over a ton. What do you think about the Steelers quarterback situation moving into 2025?
I agree with what you just said about his free agent price, because it's not a great free agent market for quarterbacks. He could be one of the more attractive players out there. Spot Track still, though, puts his value at relatively cheap when you consider starting quarterbacks. They think that he can be had for a multi-year deal in the $15 to $20 million range per season, which when you compare that to the 50-something million dollar contracts that the better quarterbacks are getting these days, is still pretty affordable. I think we know this about Omar Khan, the Steelers GM. After the way the quarterback situation was handled last season, where Kenny Pickett was the starter and had been a number 1 pick just 2 years before and was traded to the Eagles, and then Russell Wilson and Justin Fields were both signed, that tells us that Omar Khan will probably leave no stone unturned in his search for the next Steelers quarterback. And there's probably conversations going on about things that we don't even know about. I mean, the report last week came out about Trevor Lawrence. I mean, that kind of got debunked, but it wouldn't be shocking if those types of conversations were going on. Omar Khan just making phone calls. Hey, what would it take to pry away so-and-so? All that said, I still think Justin Fields will be the Steelers quarterback, partially because Arthur Smith is said to have really liked him and had wanted him to remain Pittsburgh's quarterback when they made that switch to Russell Wilson. But also simply because, again, options, man. Are the Steelers, like if the Steelers were going to make that Trevor Lawrence trade, they were going to have to part with a 1st and a 2nd round pick and then pay him $55 million a year.
Yeah.
It's just like, what's the cost of going out and getting a top echelon QB? And can the Steelers make that move? I just don't know if they can.
I think, too, the one aspect in all of these negotiations that we've talked about, whether it's, the Myles Garrett stuff, whether it's Matthew Stafford, whether we're talking about Sam Darnold as a free agent, and in this case, Justin Fields, don't think for a second the Steelers don't want to try and get him locked up. If they view him as, hey, let's run with this guy this year, they want to get him locked up before free agency. They don't want to wait for his price tag to become even more inflated. And so maybe Justin Fields' agent and his group has said, we're not interested in talking. Okay. All of a sudden it gets leaked that the Steelers are trying to trade for a Trevor Lawrence type. Now, all of a sudden, Justin Fields camp might say, wait, what's going on? I thought you said you wanted my client back. Well, I mean, you guys are, hey, or get off the pot is what they would say. And so let's get to the table and let's start negotiating.
Yeah.
those tactics do happen in the National Football League. They start happening down in the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama, when all the agents are together, all the general managers and coaches are together. They start having these little conversations. They start talking and they start trying to manipulate the other. Don't think that that's not in play here. I think ultimately, if I had to guess, and I'll see what you think, I think Justin Fields, like you said, is the Steelers quarterback. I'm curious, though, who else would be in the room, because Art Rooney II has said that he wants a similar quarterback as like a backup so that if something happens, they don't have to completely rewrite the playbook. So if Justin Fields is a quarterback, who else do they bring in that's a similar skill set?
That's the question right there. I mean, I expect the Steelers to draft a quarterback, but probably not till the mid round. A guy like maybe a Will Howard out of Ohio State. Steelers like big, strong quarterbacks who can stand in the pocket, et cetera. And he's mobile enough where you could pair him with a more athletic QB. I don't think Sam Darnold is a realistic option for the Steelers. I just don't know if his body of work is impressive enough for the Steelers to give him a big money deal and then try to build the offense around him. It feels like, having had Justin Fields in the building for a year, that they've got a really good idea of his strengths and weaknesses, and they could, as a team that wants to be a run-first offense, you can construct an offense around Justin Fields that incorporates the quarterback run game and then takes advantage of his ability to throw the ball down the field. If you're Pittsburgh, load up on offensive linemen and get a receiver to pair with George Pickens and re-sign Fields. That seems to be the smartest path forward.
Some Steeler fans want this team to trade for Joe Milton up in New England and have him be the backup. I was like, well, that's a running back right there that throws the ball a long way, but
yeah.
We'll see. We will see how that pans out in the AFC North. Let's go to our fifth topic here. Which first-year head coach will have the most success since we last recorded? Obviously, Kellen Moore was named the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. Coach, what do you think? First-year head coach, who's going to have the most wins?
Well, Kellen Moore's in a good spot because that division isn't particularly strong. Tampa, Atlanta, Carolina's still, rebuilding. Tampa and Atlanta have been sort of like perennial 8 and 9 win teams. If you get to 9 wins, you got a shot to win that division. So I think, Kellen Moore's got some pieces to work with down there. It's tempting to say Ben Johnson in Chicago because he's the hot name, but that's a very competitive division. I can't imagine the Bears are going to overtake any of the 3 teams above them. Maybe Minnesota if they regress by losing Darnold and some key free agents. Sneakily, the name I would look at is Pete Carroll out in Vegas. I think that he is a better head coach than he gets credit for. I think if they get the right quarterback, and I don't know exactly who that is. Maybe it's in the draft. Maybe it winds up being like a Shedeur Sanders. But Chip Kelly knows offense, man. He knows offense. And that was a terrible offense last year in Vegas. They still have a pretty good defense. And Pete Carroll's a pretty good motivator. It wouldn't shock. I'm not saying they're going to be a playoff team, but it wouldn't shock me if they made a significant improvement.
I'll tell you a coach that I think could have success if they can just figure out the quarterback position. I think they have some really good skill players, and that's Aaron Glenn with the New York Jets. I'm not saying that the Jets are going to make the playoffs. They're the Jets. We know what happens to the Jets, but I think that he could be getting them off on the right foot. But again, they just have this gaping hole on their roster and they can't figure out the quarterback position. I think that was step 1 was complete by saying, Aaron Rodgers, thank you, but no, thank you. We're going to move on. Let's look, though, at first-year head coaches in terms of the odds to win the Super Bowl next year, and maybe this can shine some light on it. So you talk about Chicago, 40-1 odds. That's the best out of the first-year coaches, 40-1 odds there to win the Super Bowl. That's even greater than the 60-1 for Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. Then you go to the Jets, 75-1. If you want to include those veteran coaches who are in a new place, you've got the New England Patriots and Mike Vrabel at 75-1. The Saints are 100-1 odds to win. Jacksonville, the Jaguars, 100-1. And then the Raiders, 200-1 odds. Only one team has worse odds, and that's the New York Giants at 250-1.
Quarterbacks, man. It's quarterback league, and a lot of those odds are being driven by when you look at the correlation between those franchises and their quarterback situation.
Yeah.
So It is the ultimate question. To be highly successful, to win at the highest level in the NFL, you have to have the marriage of right coach, right quarterback in place at the same time.
That's right. Absolutely. All right. Let's finish this up with a player profile like we always do. You want to talk about Milton Williams, Coach? I'll let you go.
Yeah. So, as we anticipate free agency, every free agency, there are a name or a couple of names of guys that aren't very well known that break the bank. And you go like, who's that guy? And how did that guy just get $100 million? And I think that guy is going to be Milton Williams. Now, if you paid attention to the Super Bowl, you know that name. Milton Williams had an excellent Super Bowl defensive tackle for the Eagles. Fairly quiet season. I mean, he had 6 sacks. He was a good player. Obviously, Eagles fans know him. They know he's a good player. But he was a little overshadowed by some of the big names on that defensive line in Philly, Jordan Davis and those guys. Certainly Jalen Carter. But really good postseason run for Williams. Big Super Bowl performance. He's 27. He's really athletic. He's strong. He's versatile. He can move, play different techniques along the line. He's the kind of guy entering his prime, coming off of a high-profile postseason run that will be in line to make massive amounts of money in free agency. So I think the name Milton Williams, which might not be a household name right now, is going to be a name that 3 months from now, people are going to go, whoa, that guy got paid.
Every year there's that player that you're like, really? I remember when Christian Kirk signed that ridiculous contract. He was drafted by the Arizona Cardinals and signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars. It reset the wide receiver market. And you're thinking, Christian Kirk? Really?
Yeah.
Every now and then there are those guys. And so he absolutely might fall into that. It's going to be interesting. Free agency, obviously, for those that don't know, March 10th starts the legal tampering period. The NFL tries to change that. I will never call it anything other than the legal tampering period. And then March 12th is when the new league year starts and free agent contracts can be deemed finalized. So, all right, Coach, good stuff as always. Why don't you plug your Call Sheet Daily show?
Yeah, I got some good shows coming up, man. Today, Tuesday, I got Matt Lombardi on, son of Mike Lombardi, longtime NFL executive. Matt has been a coach in the NFL and at the college level for a long time, and he was just hired on Bill Belichick's staff down there at UNC. So I'm going to talk to Matt today about what's going on with Belichick and UNC and his father, who's now the general manager of the UNC program. That's a term we've never heard before, the general manager of a college program. And it's tomorrow, Wednesday's our Whiteboard Wednesday. Got a great coach, college coach, high school coach, Steve Scanlon, and I got to break down tempo. Why do you use tempo on offense? In what situations? How do teams use it, et cetera?
Love it. Absolutely love it, Coach. Thanks for your time as always. We'll talk next week on another NFL Whip Around. Get easy.